All right, we are back on the Andre Duke Show with Carter Smith, and we have a massive special guest tonight. Kirk Barton, former Ohio State offensive lineman, former NFL player, and it is a massive thank you, Kirk, for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you guys having me, and I love the massive shirt. That is that's my favorite shirt I've ever created because we put massive in our YouTube titles a lot, and then people made fun of it that don't like us, and I was like, well, I'm gonna put on a shirt and we're gonna sell it. And we sold more of those than any item in our shop. So thank you for buying that. I appreciate you, my man.
No problem. Carter, how are you doing this
Man,
evening?
I'm doing great, man. Just going through the week, getting it done. Super excited to have a chance to talk with Kirk. I loved Kirk when he was a player at Ohio State. He's got a good relationship with my brother, so I've met him a couple times through that. So just really excited to have you on the show, Kirk. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Always, my man. Appreciate you guys.
So, with that being said, we will hop right into it. Kirk, you've talked on your podcast, Buckeye Scoop, about the Texas game in 2005. So, and you brought it up that the kicker from Miami of Ohio went to Alabama. So, how big would a kicker be in a game like that back when you were playing?
Well, I mean, I played with Nugent. Obviously, Nugent went second round, and he hit a game-winning 55-yard field goal against Marshall, where we could have lost that game. I mean, we were tied, with like 3 seconds left, and he hit a field goal that thankfully didn't send us to overtime. But and again, I'm not pitting this on Josh Houston. He kicked 5 field goals that night, but we had a 50-yarder to basically ice the game over, and we would have been up 9. With no time, with 4 minutes left. So they would have needed 2 scores. They never would have gotten 2 scores versus our defense. And we missed it. And again, that's not blaming Josh. It's just stating a fact. Or if we have Mike Nugent or we have, an ace kicker, we win the Texas game. And I think that we have a whole different set of circumstances. Like I remember in 2004, we were so bad on offense, especially in the beginning of the season, that like Mike Nugent, we played NC State. NC State had one of the best defenses I've ever seen. They had 3 first-round picks on their defensive line. They had Mario Williams, Manny Lawson, Demario Presley, Tank Tyler. I mean, it was literally like unbelievable how good their defense was. And Stephen Tulloch was also like a second-round pick linebacker. So their front 7 was incredible. And Nuge kicked, I think he kicked 4 or 5. We won 22 to 14 or some weird score. And Nuge kicked 5 field goals that day. I think he kicked 5. And if we don't have Nuge, we lose that game. We lose the Marshall game. So I just think in the era of the transfer portal, man, when you can get a kicker who's maybe kicked early in his career, because sometimes kickers, they're not the easiest thing to evaluate. But if a kid goes somewhere where he can start as a freshman, he does great. And a kid like this who's got a year left, I think you take him in a heartbeat and just totally fortify the offense and make it an A+ offense, because you see the best offenses in the NFL. Lamar Jackson won the MVP. He had Justin Tucker. The Chiefs obviously had Harrison Butker. I love kickers that have huge legs, like guys that can hit from mid-50s, hit from 50. And there's got to be a kicker somewhere on this earth that's got eligibility that can do that. And we haven't had a guy that can do that consistently for a long time, but Michigan finds guys and these other schools somehow find guys. And in the transfer portal era, I think that our kicking, not punting, our punters have been good. Cam Johnson's still in the NFL, but our kicking, we haven't had a kicker do anything in the National Football League since Nuge, and that was in 2004. So I don't know how that's possible. But again, that's just my opinion. And Jaden Fielding might prove me wrong. I hope he listens to everything I say and he proves me wrong and he wins the Groza this year, because again, Mike Nugent as a true freshman was terrible. And then as a sophomore, he was the best kicker in America. So things can change. But I think that kickers are valuable. And again, I know everyone makes fun of kickers and they're not real players, but when they win national championships and they win Super Bowls, and they're the guys that have their balls on the line, with 1 second left, and they got to ace it down the middle to win the game. That counts to me. So that's just my opinion. I was very disappointed we didn't get this kid from Miami because I was praying that he'd hit the portal, and he did. And then, of course, he goes to Alabama. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and I mean, how big would it have been to have a kicker like Nugent in the Georgia game a couple years ago, right? Where you could possibly win the game there if you have a kicker that can bury a 55-yarder.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, sometimes it's not just that end of game kick, but sometimes there's points in games where when you miss a field goal, it's a humongous momentum swing. And you can feel like the air come out of the building sometimes, like when we miss one on the road or when you hit it. If you hit it, it's a huge, going in at halftime or whatever, like you get some points on the board. And again, people might think that that's nothing, getting an extra 3. But, when you miss a field goal, man, especially in a tight game versus like equal talent, it really means something. So when you play Michigan, man, you got to hit your layups, man. You got to hit your 3, and that's the thing that we haven't been great about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So just real quick, going back to the Texas game from that year, obviously we're dealing with another quarterback battle this year. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys kind of had a quarterback battle going on to start that season, correct?
Yeah, it was a weird situation because Troy obviously got suspended for the Alamo Bowl and for Week 1 versus Miami of Ohio, and then Justin played the Alamo Bowl. He did a great job. He did well against Miami of Ohio, and then Week 2 we're playing Texas, who's the best team in the country. They won the national title, and we had this kind of a wonky rotation where Justin started, and then Troy came in, and it was one of those circumstances where it was tough because, I mean, I hate rotating quarterbacks. I don't think it's fair to the quarterbacks, but I think that when you've got 2 guys that are equal, and I felt like at the end of 2004, Troy separated, but then he kind of stubbed his toe with the suspension. So it was a tough call. And again, I wish that we would have just picked one and went with it, probably, especially if we would have picked Troy. But the quarterback things aren't always as cut and dry as you can think, especially when guys they're non-contact in fall camp. Because Troy, when guys can move, when you see these modern quarterbacks like Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, the guys that you take in your fantasy football league, and basically it's like having like a third running back in your starting lineup when you have the guys that are athletic. Like when those guys are in a quarterback competition during fall camp and they're non-contact and they can't create and do the things that make them special, then all of a sudden, I don't think you really know what they can do until you put them out there in a real game where there is no black jersey, there is no non-contact jersey. But, a guy like Troy, when he could create on the run, it was kind of like Allen Iverson with his crossover. Like when he'd get open, man, I mean, he could make things happen that nobody in the history of Ohio State football could make happen. So it was tough. Again, it was, that's one of those haunting ones. I mean, that game probably haunts me more than Florida, because Florida, we just got our wheels, we got our doors blown up. But Florida also, like, we weren't really that good in 2006. Like in 2005, we were really good. Like that 2005 Ohio State team, if they would have played the 2006 team, the 2005 team would have dog walked us just because our defense was so much better. And really our offense was too, because we had Nick Mangold and Rob Sims. Like we had NFL dudes on our line that were much better than the guys that we played in 2006. So that Texas game haunts me to this day, because we had the best team in the country beat, and we let them go, which that sucks.
Yeah, absolutely.
In another game that year, what about Penn State?
We played those? Yeah, that was the first whiteout, so that spawned the whiteout craze, and it was the best college football environment of all time. I mean, it was so loud. It was so crazy. And honestly, I'd never been there. Most of us had never been there. Some of the older, some like Rob Sims, Nick Mangold, they've been there, but they played I think it was a noon game in 2003. But we'd never experienced a whiteout before. So I don't think we were ready for the noise. And I got hurt, which is what really sucked. In the second quarter, I blew my knee out on a field goal protection, and it hurt bad, and it sucked, and I couldn't finish the game. And their best player was their DN that I blocked all day, and he was a first round pick, Tom Bahali. He played for the Chiefs. I was a Pro Bowler, and like I played him in 2004, and I thought he was good, but I didn't think he was like incredible or anything. Like I didn't think he was like some guy who was like, oh my God, how am I going to block this guy? And when I was in there in '05, like I handled him and I played against him the whole game because he didn't flip. Like they don't flip their DNs. They play the same guy plays against the right tackle the whole game. So I was handling him and I killed him in '04 when I was a freshman and I frankly wasn't even good. And you know, so then when I got hurt, it got a little bit tougher because we had to we put Rob Sims at right tackle. Rob Sims had never played right tackle in his life, and they put him out there. And then we put Booty out there at right tackle. And Booty was a true freshman, and you know, no 18-year-old can handle that environment. And he actually did pretty well. But you know, at the end of the game, Tamba, of course, sacks the quarterback, and it's like my nightmare realized when the guy that I handled the whole year ends the game and kills Troy, and Troy does a somersault, and they still play that clip when we play Penn State because it was dramatic of an ending. So that sucked. So yeah, those are the two. And that was the hardest part, man, is like by that time in the season, like the season was over basically because we lost two. And, you know, back then it was like, if you're not in the, you know, the top two-ish, you're not going to have a shot to play for the championship. That was pre-BCS, but it was still, you know, once you get down, you get a second loss through like 6 weeks, man, your season's over for you, you know, in terms of winning the Natty, which was that was actually our goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Back then it was, you know, in one loss, you might still have a chance, but 2 losses, basically you're out of it. So that had to be tough. And then kind of getting away from maybe some of the more negative memories of that year. The one game that I personally had a invested interest in was I believe it was the Fiesta Bowl with Notre Dame. Kind of walk me through what you guys thought when you watched them on film and kind of your guys' mentality going into that game.
Well, I mean, we knew they were really good. We knew that they had a lot of NFL guys that were really well coached. People can say whatever they want about Charlie Weiss, but you know their offense was really good. I mean, Brady was playing at a very high level. Obviously, he was a guy that probably could have left and been a top 10 pick. I don't think it's safe for his senior year helped him. I think if he had left after that third year, he would have made more. Good running back. Darius Walker, their line was really good. Ryan Harris had a bunch of NFL guys. Ryan Harris, the left tackle, good player. Samardzija, who ended up being a pitcher in the big leagues, was a force as a wide receiver. Defensively, I remember they had Victor Amiri, who again they were another team that didn't flip. So I played against Victor Amiri the entire game, and he was the best player on their entire defense. He ended up being a second-round pick by the Eagles. They had Tom Zibikowski, who we actually had the same agent, so we actually became pretty tight once we got to the league. But you know they had dudes, but again we had guys that could really run, and we thought we could get after their back end a little bit, and we did. Like that's why we were throwing it up over the top to Teddy and San Antonio, and we didn't think they could run with us, and they couldn't. So that was something that like our game plan was let's take them deep, and we knew they were going to blitz. It's kind of funny when you study these teams is that what are the weird things you study, or like what could they do against you that they maybe haven't shown on film, given the break, given a 30-day absence between, you know, the Michigan game and then the bowl game. So like we didn't have a Big Ten title game back then. So after we beat Michigan before Thanksgiving, we didn't play again until January. So it's a big 35-day window. So you could literally install an entire new defense. And we thought they were going to blitz us pretty heavy just based on our runs and our tendencies. And the one end around, the Z around, which, you know, Ched Ginn was the Z, which is like your flanker, your speed receiver. We did a self scout and we ran to the right behind me like 75% of the time that year. So we ran our signature play, which was like it was called 8 load, which is an option play that Troy never pitched it. It was an option play where he never pitched it. He only carried it. And against Iowa, we scored 2 touchdowns with it. We ran it a lot, but we put in a reverse off of it. So you start the option action and you see the linebackers come flying right into the hole where we'd hit it, because I'm sure that they went over that with their scout team for a long time. And they overcommit big time to where the play was going, but then you have Ted coming back the other way on the Z around. So there was nobody there. And San Antonio had the best crack block, and he'd have been thrown in prison if he did that today because he'd been targeting and everything else. But San Antonio killed their walkout guy, their walkout linebacker, like killed him, took him off his feet. and Ted was like off to the races. So
Yeah.
I just remember our offensive staff did a great job. Tress, Bowles, like Jim Bowman, those guys really did a good job of scheming those guys up. And our defense played well. I mean, they weathered the early storm because Notre Dame went right down the field and scored to start the game, and then they clamped up a little bit. And but it was good. I mean, we knew it would be a challenge, and those are the fun games because they had equal talent to us. We were probably a little more talented, but it wasn't like the normal huge gap of talent that Ohio State football normally encounters on a Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the one thing that I wondered if you'd touch on, just because watching the game, the thing that jumped off the screen to me was just how much faster you guys were, at least at receiver, compared to the defensive backs. It looked like they were running in long grass and you guys were on AstroTurf.
Yeah. I mean, we're lucky we had Ted and Santonio and Gonzo, and obviously Gonzo. That play where he didn't catch it was the play of the game, where Zibikowski picked it up and ran it back to the house, because that was that was like the early times of replay where they said that he didn't catch it and it was incomplete, and because that was going to be a fumble for a touchdown. Yeah. And I was like sitting there, I was like, please God, do not let this be a touch, because that would have tied. I think that would have tied the game, but we were able to get out and score and ice the game down. But yeah, it was those are tight games, and again, that's why it's fun at Ohio State to play against teams that are equal talent or close, because then you have to really, you got to really be sharp. You can't just, Ohio State 99% of the time when we play, we've got better players than the other team on the sideline. But there's that 1% when you play Georgia or you play a good Notre Dame team, where you got to actually, win. You have to go win the game instead of just being better than they are. So it was a fun night, and I didn't know that'd be my last bowl win, but it was really fun, and I think it kind of set us in a little bit of a trap where it was like we had this streak of going to the Fiesta Bowl. We stayed at the Fairmont Scottsdale Princess, and then we wore the white jerseys, and we beat the Hurricanes. We beat Kansas State. We beat Notre Dame. So then, of course, the next year we play Florida and we get our breaks beat off. And it's like, but we stayed at the same hotel and we're the same. We were the 1 seed and we wore our white jerseys. Because again, like, I don't know if it was superstition or what it was, but it just kind of is what it is. I mean, it didn't matter what color jerseys we were wearing. I'm just being funny, but it was like we fell into the trap of familiarity. And again, I get it, because if you wear the red jerseys against Florida and we lose 41-14, then people are like, why did you wear the white jerseys? You could have did that. Yeah. And we were undefeated. So it's just one of those like funny things that you think about sometimes 20 years later.
Yeah, for sure. That Florida game when I was at that game, that was the crowd and the electricity in the stadium when Teddy took that kickoff back, and then the just shock and awe when they saw him hobbling off the field was just,
oh my God. Well, the funny thing is that I won't talk too much on it, but it's like he came back in and played in the game. Like, that was the funny thing, is like I didn't even know he got hurt, because that first offensive play that we had after Florida scored, he's back out there and he actually ran a route and we threw him the ball. So like it wasn't like his leg was like the bone was poking out of the skin or anything. Like, so I didn't know what was going on. Obviously Ted was too hurt to play, but I remember like, I asked him that, and the thing, I was like, why aren't you in? And he's like, and he looked at me and he's like, come on, man, let's go. And I'm like, and again, I love Teddy, but I was like, why aren't you playing? Like, I mean, we need you. You're the best. You're literally the best player on our team by far. You were the 8th overall pick or 9th pick in the draft. Like, no one else on the team was anywhere close to the top 10 in the draft. So, I mean, that was like one of those ones where you just know that it ain't going to be your night when your best player gets hurt on the first play. You're just like, there's sometimes in football where you're just like, God, this is going to suck. And it was like, I tell people, like, it was like with the 49ers last year in the NFC Championship, like they lose Brock Purdy and then they lose their backup quarterback and they're down to Deebo Samuel playing quarterback. Like, you just know that, like, sometimes in football, man, it just ain't your night. And that was a night. It was definitely not our night. And again, it's not taking anything away from Urban. Urban was the master of getting guys ready to go. And those guys were hungry and disrespected. And they played that card up to the hill and they smashed us. And again, that's, like, I tell people, that's the beauty of football, is everybody who's ever played or coached has had their brains beat out at some point. It doesn't matter if you're Nick Saban, Dabo Sweeney, Ryan Day, like that's the beauty of it. Bill Belichick, you're gonna, at some point it's gonna be your turn to get smashed. That was our turn, and it was a humbling night, but it was a terrible night. But that's just part of life. Like, you don't get to win them all, and it sucked because I felt terrible for Troy because that was a game that haunts his legacy because he probably, if he wins that, he's probably the best Buckeye of all time. But it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, coming off winning the Heisman, and I mean, it's not like Troy had a bad game that game or anything either.
Well, I mean, he didn't have a chance because we didn't run the ball. He didn't have his number one receiver. Again, it's like if you take Kelsey away from Mahomes, or when you see these quarterbacks, if their number one guy goes down, sometimes if they're just really incredible, they can still make it work. But a lot of times, man, it's tough. When you don't have your top guy, and again, like we just didn't play well. Like we didn't play. I mean, there wasn't any fast. Like our offense, we sucked at offense, but our defense gave up 41 points too. We had a bunch of personal fouls. We played dumb football. So, and Urban was ahead of his time with that offense. That offense was. I was sitting there watching that, man, and our guys were out of gas. Our guys were winded, tired, and I was watching it on the big screen, and they're the way that they stretched the field horizontally. In the running game, I mean, our guys were basically like running gassers the whole game, and they were exhausted. So Urban was ahead of his time with what he did there, and I was excited when he came here because I got to learn that offense, and it was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
In another game from your playing days, how about the game in 2006? What was the build up going into that game?
Well, I think it was one that obviously, like, when you look at the schedules, and it was like once we got past like Penn State, we knew that it was kind of Cupcake City, and we had a scare against Illinois, but otherwise it was, we were coasting, and so was Michigan. I mean, Michigan got past Notre Dame or Penn State or somebody, and then they were coasting, and it was like we saw what was coming. After they smashed Notre Dame, they jumped up in the polls pretty high, and that that's what made it the magic of the 1-2 games. They beat that Notre Dame team was like a preseason number 2 team. I think they were because they'd played us, and they had like 20 guys come back. So Brady was back and all those guys, and Michigan just smashed them out at Notre Dame, and so we knew they were going to be good. And again, they were good in 05. They just they had some bad losses. They were injured, but they still had sometimes the record doesn't reflect the talent level because they still had Alan Branch and Lamar Woodley and Leon Hall and, Mario Manningham. They had guys that were like dudes, like real dudes. Jake Long, obviously first overall pick in the draft. So, we knew they were going to be good. They put in a new running game. They ran the Denver Broncos zone offense, and they were really good at that. And they were like just buzzsawing teams when I'd watch them on film. And I think that, we knew it was going to be a big challenge. And I worried about our defense in that game because I thought our defense was good. I didn't think it was great, and I was right. And we ended up giving up like 39 points, but thank God we scored 42. But that was the most points I think we'd ever given up to a Michigan team, I think. But it was, hey, we scored 3 more than they did, and it's a team game. But, I knew that their offense was legit because, I mean, when you've got Manningham as your number one guy, Mike Hart was a good college player, not a good NFL player. Jake Long's your left tackle. Henny, who played like 15 years in the league, was a really good quarterback. Like, you knew it was going to be tough, and you knew you weren't going to shut him out. And the buildup was crazy. And then, Bo dies the day before the game, which makes it even crazier because you've got, the guy that they're we've got the Woody Hayes Center, they've got the Schembechler Hall. So the guy that their football building's named after dies the day before the game, or Thursday before the game. It was nuts. So, yeah, there was a lot of pressure to win, and I don't know if we blew our stack that night and we ran out of gas for Florida, or we thought we were too good, or what it was. But it was kind of like we sold out to beat Michigan, and then we didn't have that same. We didn't play anywhere near as flawless of a game against Florida, obviously, because that Michigan team was a team that I think they kind of suffered the same fate where they kind of blew their energy, and then they didn't do well in the Rose Bowl versus SC either because I think we were so exhausted from that game, and they were probably defeated from losing that game. So I always kind of wonder about that because we didn't look like the same team, and sometimes that happens when you've got all this energy and you expend it and then you get to win. Then you really need the coaching staff and the leaders to beat you back down into a submission to get ready to go for that next one because it's hard, man. You beat Michigan in that 1-2 game, like the environment around Columbus is different. People, it's almost like you got the Woody Hayes thing where it's like, kick the old granny in the knee. Like anyone that gives you a compliment over the age of 83, kick him in the knee or whatever. Like, that thing where it's like, if someone compliments you, don't take it. Like, don't eat the cheese. Like, there's all these motivational things where it's like, when people are saying great things about you and how great you are, don't listen to it. Like, don't focus on, you got to make it all white noise. And I think that's something that we obviously could have been better at. But that Michigan game will always be special. One of my favorite games, and again, that's another game that's clouded just because of how poorly we did in the championship game. But at the time, the 1-2 game was incredible. And that was, again, like I told you, that was like a real Michigan team. That was a good Michigan team. That wasn't, some of these teams that we've played recently have just stunk up at Michigan. But that was like, look at the guys, look at David Harris, played 10 years for the Jets, was a captain. And, like those guys went to the league and they were like legit in the league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you already touched on it a little bit, and I don't know, I'm curious your thoughts. I almost feel like when you come off a big win like that, it's almost better to go right back and play your next game the next week, so you're still off that high. But obviously with the national championship game, you guys had 40 days off in between. Do you think that played a role as far as you guys maybe lost some of your energy or lost some of your focus after the Michigan game, and maybe that was part of the reason you guys didn't perform as well in the championship game?
Well, I think that, obviously now with the current structure with the Big Ten championship game, you can't really celebrate the Michigan game anymore because you got to go play, especially now where they removed the divisions, and now it's like you're going to have to go play Oregon. You're going to have to go play a top 5 team on the other side of the Big Ten because it's literally going to be the 2 top teams now. So there could be a scenario you play Michigan again. So you don't get to really celebrate because back then, like when we played, like we were done before Thanksgiving, which is crazy. I mean in 06, we had a bye week. I think we played 12 straight games in 06. We didn't even have a bye week in 06 because we had a bye. And then they removed the bye week for whatever reason, and we played Bowling Green. That was during what was supposed to be our bye week. So we played 12 straight, and we were done super early. But I think with the current structure, it's all different because there's no real. I mean, obviously you're going to celebrate beating Michigan, but when you got to play Oregon the next week, like your celebration is going to be like a couple hours, and that's it. Because when you got to go play the Oregon Ducks or whoever's that 2 team in the Big Ten, like you got to get your mind right. You can't be out, kicking it and having a good time and relaxing because you're going to be facing a monster. And that's something that's going to be intriguing this year because we don't get to play Iowa or Northwestern or Michigan State or these like turds from the old Big Ten, like Western Conference that now you got to go play like real teams. So that makes it tough. And then, with the playoffs, like it's just going to be such a mental and physical proposition for these guys because they've got to stay even and they've got to peak at the right time. And that's something that Urban was great about is he'd get the guys to peak at the right time because that's delicate because, you got to figure out how hard do I push them? How hard do I beat them down? Do we put the hammer down on them in practice today or not? How beat up are they? And that's why Mickey Marotti's really good is because he'd always give them good advice on, the team's beat trash, take it down a little bit, or, hey, let's turn it up a little bit and beat them down a little bit. Because, managing your roster and managing the health of your players is going to be so critical when you can play 17 games now. Because, the olden days, like when I played, it was 13 at most. And now you got to add 4 more games on top of it. And you're not playing Akron 4 times. You're playing like SEC schools. You're playing good Big Ten schools. And it's gonna be a battle. And I mean, I'm excited for it. I think it's gonna be great for college football. But managing your roster is gonna be so critical going forward. And that's why Ohio State, knock on wood, hanging onto their depth in the transfer portal right now is absolutely huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're playing 17 games. That's a full NFL season. So.
And speaking of Michigan, Kirk, I didn't know if you got a chance to catch the Sharon Moore post-game interview from the spring game. It almost, to me, kind of looked like a hostage interview because he did his press conference and then they interviewed him on the field, and he looked zero energy, didn't have hardly anything to say. Yeah, we played well. We're going to continue to work. It was almost like he was deer in headlights almost.
I I think he knows what's coming. Again, I know Michigan fans want to say nothing's going to happen, slap on the wrist, whatever. But it's just like, when you look at how egregious the cheating was and how much of a luxury it is to have an electronic paper trail from a guy like Connor Stallions, who just used his own name for buying tickets. And I'm sure they found, transactions, and I'm sure they're going through his Venmo and his bank statements and whatever. Like, I mean, because, you can, subpoena that stuff. I mean, it's gonna be ugly. And again, Michigan, the Hamburger Gate thing just dropped like this week, and that was from 2020 during COVID. So these things take time. I know everybody's like they want instant justice and instant executions, but the NCAA has got to be thorough. And honestly, some of this information takes time to get, and I think that they're going to be smashed. And again, I say it, I've said it a billion times on my show. Like, every single coach left. The strength coach. I mean, Jim Harbaugh pillaged the entire Schembechler Hall of every coach that he could get except for Sherrone Moore, and the guys that he didn't want. So he didn't want Mike Hart, obviously, because Mike Hart's a head case. And then his son, Jay Harbaugh, went to Seattle with McDonald, who was there, 2 years ago. But or 3 years ago, excuse me. So I think that they know what's coming. I think it's going to be hard to recruit up there. Again, they're getting kids to commit right now, which is great. They got a good defensive player the other day, but will it stick if they get hammered? Which is what I'm projecting. They're going to get hammered worse than we've seen, just because of, again, they were cheating. U.S. Integrity, which is a company you guys should Google if you guys are listening to this. Like, U.S. Integrity is involved in this thing, and U.S. Integrity, they're hired by every major gambling company, every major league, as in like the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, to investigate fraudulent movement in gambling lines. Again, like we saw the NBA player recently get a lifetime ban because his friend dropped $80,000 at a casino on him like scoring under 8 points and under 6 assists and under 4 rebounds. And so that was like, people like US, I mean, that's like a layup for US Integrity, but they investigate all batting patterns. They have access to all of the online transactions, and, their computers can pick up when there's really suspicious activity on some random event or random game, or, if some Akron versus Bowling Green Tuesday night game all of a sudden gets $1 million wager on one side, like, that's going to send up a big red flag. So those guys are investigating Michigan. Obviously, there's rumors of potential gambling going on inside of Schembechler Hall, which would be a no-no. So again, it's there's a lot of layers to this, and we've probably seen 20% of it compared to what the investigation is going to unveil. So I'm excited for it. I can't wait for it, and it's going to be one of the best days in Buckeye Scoop history when it happens.
Right. You guys were the first ones to report on that and to keep it going. And I almost have secondhand embarrassment for the fan base up there and for the beat reporters, just for the simple fact of that they had a lot of information that they sat on. And it's wild to me that their love for the University of Michigan would outweigh, checks and balances and doing it the right way.
Well, I think that they're desperate. I think that was something that was, again, Urban Meyer beat Jim Harbaugh 5 straight times, and then they dodged us. Ryan beat him in 19, and then they dodged us in the COVID year because they could. And I knew they were 2-4 that COVID year. And then, they come back in 21, 22, 23, and they wax us. They beat us, pretty good. And I think that they were desperate, and again, Jim Harbaugh's, he's a guy that he'll do anything to win. And he proved it by doing what he did. And he's also a liar. Like he literally, non-cooperative, played dumb with the cheeseburger gate thing. So he did the same thing with this sign stealing deal. And again, like I always tell people, look, I've been, it's like, your brother Zach, he's been a coach. Like, if Zach was calling plays for Ohio State or Michigan or wherever, like he's not going to listen to some intern unless that intern is giving him like the golden ticket. Like he's got the Gray Sports Almanac of plays, and he's like saying, "Oh, this is a run. Oh, this is a pass. Oh, this is the coverage we're getting." Like and Connor Stalions knew it, and again, it was sophisticated. He studied it like it was a graduate level exam to know who was the signaler, who was the live signaler, what the signals were, and he was accurate. And again, even if you're not 100% accurate, even if you're 80% accurate, that's a humongous advantage. And again, I always tell people, like, you guys play cards, you guys play blackjack, you guys play poker. If you know what everyone else has and what's in the deck and what's coming next, like, is that an edge? I think it's an edge. I think it's the biggest edge you could ever. It's the biggest edge you could ever have. And again, that's why, if you try to do the card counting stuff in Vegas, like, you're gonna get, it's gonna be like casino where they put your head in the vice, basically, because they don't look kindly upon cheating and taking money and making money. And that's what Michigan did. And again, it might not have been in the form of gambling, but Jim Harbaugh just signed a about $100 million contract, 6-7 years, $20 million a year, off of winning a national championship. Because if he goes 2-10 again, no one's hiring him. But I think, like I said, it's gonna be fascinating to see this thing all wind down. Because again, I think that the stark contrast in how much better they got is pretty damning. They're 2-4 the COVID year, and then all of a sudden they turn into a juggernaut because they know what's coming. And again, I was a GA and an intern, and when I got to draw blitzes, when the coach would say, "Hey, pick any blitz you want to run against our this play," I would literally look at what the protection was. I'd know what the protection was, and I would pick the perfect blitz to get home versus that protection. Something that guys just flat out couldn't block. They couldn't switch it, or I'd get them to switch it and change the protection the wrong way, and I'd bring it from the other side because I knew what would trigger everything. So that was kind of a huge edge for me. So that's kind of what they were working with. But like I said, I'm excited for the hammer to drop.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that I wanted to just touch on, and we can get you out of here and get you on your way, but what do you think? I mean, obviously, we don't have a official starting quarterback. I know it's been reported that Will Howard will be the starting quarterback at Ohio State. What do you think his ceiling is as a quarterback at Ohio State?
I mean, I think it's, I don't know if he's Josh Allen. Josh Allen went top 10, obviously, so that's pretty gaudy. But could he be like a Diet Coke Josh Allen and end up being a second or third round pick? Sure. I mean, he's a big guy. He's been inaccurate in the past, but that's on Ryan Day to fix it, and Chip Kelly. I mean, those guys are. I mean, especially Ryan. Ryan's. Him and Lincoln Riley are the S tier quarterback gurus in college football. And so, if it's a mechanical thing, if it's a processing thing, if it's a whatever thing, like he's got to get all that fixed. But the other part of it is like, I don't know how good his receivers were at Kansas State, but I can't remember a guy from Kansas State going to the NFL since Jordy Nelson, and that was 15 years ago or whatever it was. So Jordy Nelson played in my Senior Bowl, so that was a long time ago. So I think that when all of a sudden you're throwing it to guys that are better players, and magically I think you look a lot better than you really are. I think that's going to be something that'll be really helpful, because obviously when you've got J.J. Smith and you've got Ennis and you've got Tate and you've got Emeka and you've got whoever we roll out at tight end, and you've got Trey and Quinshawn in the backfield, like, I think you're magically going to be a lot better, because I think that infrastructure matters. I think that as good as some great quarterbacks are, I think that when they have dynamic guys to throw to, they get like twice, they're twice as prolific. Like Aaron Rodgers has always been fantastic, but he's had, Jordy Nelson was really good in his prime. Randall Cobb was good. Later, Devontae Adams was all pro. And I'm sure Rodgers to a degree helped develop those guys into that, but it's a lot better to throw to those guys than it is, the guys that Tom Brady had, when Tom Brady's number one guy was like Jacoby Myers. And, it was like, I always laughed about, it was a crime what they did to Brady in New England, because they would get rid of every good receiver he had. They'd trade him, or they just wouldn't draft any, and it was crazy. So I think that Will Howard having elite infrastructure around him, a good offensive line, I think it'll do wonders. And plus, the Big Ten, like we're the big dog in the Big Ten, so we'll be favored in every game we play in the regular season. And I think that I think his wheels will do something that'll make our fans probably cry tears of joy when he runs for his first touchdown, because we haven't our QB1 hasn't ran for a touchdown in 2 full seasons, which is insane in modern college football, but that's where we're at.
Yeah.
All right, Carter, you got anything else?
No, just thank you again, Kirk. It's been fun talking to you and catching up and just getting some insight from you. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Anytime, guys. I appreciate you guys for having me. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you too, Kirk. Everybody out there, go follow Buckeye Scoop. Get on the message board. Kirk is there 23 hours a day. And he's live on YouTube. And I think you're on Spotify, Apple Music as well.
Yep.
So with that, that's the end of the Andre Duke Show. And if you're seeing this for the first time, hit the like and subscribe button. And we appreciate you guys. Have a good night.
Appreciate you.